Breaking news. The United States now identifies as the Great North American Empire.
You are tuning in to the Cigar Guys podcast, where aficionados and newcomers alike gather to explore the vast cigar universe. Meet your host, Alexander Gonzalez, Mark Nikolai, his big little brother Zachary Nikolai, and Jared Burrows. So, sit back, light up, and let's get the conversation started.
Now, I've seen you handle things with your mouth. I'm simply trying to get at is that the Maduro may be too potent. Not all of us are Maduro guys, so you can't just have a Maduro all the time.
Okay. I would say that I'm actually enjoying more like Connecticut's and lighter cigars recently. Me personally, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you know more than I do.
It's about cigars or life. I have an answer.
For which one?
I just think like, oh, you left the humidor open. I just think everyone goes through like a palate change all the time. Just like I've been smoking a lot more Connecticut's. It's closed now. Thanks.
I would agree. Like I go through phases, I feel like.
Yeah. Like I had a Padron the other day. I think you were there. I think you were sitting right next to me. I think you watched me smoke it. It wasn't the same as it always has been. But I already had like 2 cups of coffee and a cigar before then, so like
it's either that or you caught the HBV1 virus that's going around, and it's like basically COVID but more upgraded. And...
It was still a great cigar. It just was like a 9 instead of a 10.
Oh, okay.
It was a 64, not a 26. Maybe that's what it was.
The 26 is better. Oh my god! I'm gonna do the old.
What did it light on fire?
You ever seen anyone do this? It's because all my lighters are not working. There you go.
It's actually 40 degrees in here right now, so it's very...
It's 40 degrees in here right now?
Yeah, that's why a lot of lighters aren't working.
Oh, okay. Thank you guys for tuning into another episode of the Cigar Guys podcast. We are here in the studio once again with the 2 best cigar guys. Why'd you put that on the script?
I don't read from a script.
I know, but I didn't write that down, but it's there. Anyway, Jared is here.
ChatGPT wrote it.
Jared Burrows is here. Alex Gonzalez is here. Alex Gonzalez is smoking a Besa Maduro that he got from besacigars.com. And Jared is smoking
the Osgener family cigars, Bosphorus, which is one of my favorite Osgener cigars. I pretty much killed that box. I'll probably push it into February, but I love it. We'll see. There's some time.
We'll see. But we're going to be discussing some things we've seen in the news. I want everyone to keep in mind that this episode is being filmed on Wednesday, January 8th. We're going to release this on the January 18th. So some things might change between now and then, but this is going to be a pre-inaugural episode. Speaking of inauguration, the man that is being inaugurated as the 47th president of the United States has been saying some pretty unprecedented things in the news lately. Would you
I'm
agree?
pretty uninformed. So like, what's been going on?
We're going to be discussing some of the stuff he's talked about. For example, President-elect Trump has discussed this idea about buying Canada and essentially making Canada a part of the U.S. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. He's also talked about making Greenland a part of the U.S. He's talked about taking back the Panama Canal and a few other things that we're going to get into, but those are going to be the first three topics that we tackle. So Canada, our brother to the north, our neighbor, let's say.
Yeah.
No issues with Canada. I mean, we're all getting along just fine. And Trump comes out and says that essentially they're going to buy Canada. What are your initial thoughts about that?
I wonder if he'll keep the name because ideally, I'm serious. Like ideally, he'd probably break up all that land mass into individual states. It probably won't be just a 51st state, right? I mean, it's just so large.
I think that it would be easy if they just kept the current. They're not. What are they called? They're not states. They're
Provinces.
Provinces.
Yeah.
Just kept all those essentially and made those each their own state.
I actually don't know how many are there. Is it four or five?
No. Well, so there's 13 different, I think it's provinces or I can't think of the term that they were using, but essentially there's 13 of these states that Canada has. So you'd be adding 13 states to Canada if you did, or to the United States if you did it that way instead of just having one big state known as Canada.
So we'd have 63 stars on the flag now.
From just that, yeah, if you did it that way.
And that's why Greenland comes in because it evens that out.
Oh, potentially. But yeah, so there's a couple ways you could do it. I mean, you could have just Canada as one state. You could divide it up based on their quote unquote states, or you can do it completely differently and maybe do 4 new ones. I don't know. I'm sure that could be ironed out in the future.
It has to be at least an even number, right?
Yeah.
We got to make sure we do that. I don't want an odd number.
I hate odd numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's odd to me.
But there's reasons why this conversation came up. Obviously, before this, Trump talked about 25% tariffs on Canada, basically almost to like pay us back in a way, if that makes sense. The whole idea of that is to help. I mean, he plans on putting tariffs on quite a few countries in order to help bring jobs back, bring a lot of industrialization back to America, manufacturing back to America. So we started with that conversation with former Prime Minister Trudeau, sat down, said 25% tariffs, and the guy apparently was surprised by this. He didn't see this coming, he said, or so he...
Just like he didn't see himself stepping down.
True.
The exact same time that Trump was certified. He didn't see that coming.
That is true. We talked about it last night with my family, but
Was he talking about it too with his family?
who? Trudeau?
Yeah.
That's what he said.
It was a long time coming. I mean, to be honest.
Yeah.
Regardless, I don't know the parties up there, honestly, but I just think that at least TikTok is pretty, some people are pretty happy about it, I guess.
I think just like the United States, Canada is pretty much divided like almost 50-50 in terms of which way people are leaning, or at least like mainstream wise. If you look at America, it's like, oh, there's Republican and Democrat or conservative liberal, and it's pretty much 50-50, like generally speaking. Canada is kind of the same way, and they have, a few big cities that are densely populated with left-leaning individuals, and then the rest of the country is more conservative-leaning. So it's almost like just a smaller clone of the United States that we'd be adding into our country, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think Canada's awesome. I think every Canadian Met's been great. They've been super nice and friendly to me. I think they'd be a great addition. I think they just fit right in. Honestly, I don't think it'd be that big of a deal if they just joined. It'd just be all of a sudden we could drive over there without having to be stopped by the border police, the border patrol, or whatever, right? It'd just be a lot easier.
No, I mean, I
think it'd be great.
I don't see why that wouldn't be a good thing to happen. I mean, we would essentially be combining, number one, our GDPs, obviously, the two countries. We'd be combining the resources, sharing resources. I think that there's a lot of benefits that could come from it that would benefit both countries now as one, helping to bring prices down, or at least, end inflation a lot sooner.
Yeah.
If we work together, and even if we talk about bringing Greenland in, that's essentially 3 big powerhouses of resources that you can pool together and share and utilize together. I think that there's no reason for these 3 countries to not work together to make ourselves greater, essentially, and mutually benefit.
Can you say that again? What are we doing?
We're making ourselves greater. I can't really say a specific name because we're not together yet, but maybe like, the greater United States of America or something like that, the great North American Empire.
How many people would that add to the census, actually?
So Canada, it's like 56 million. No, sorry, it's 46 million or something like that. So we would officially go from like 340 million to 380 million, give or take. Personally, I think we're already at 380.
Officially.
But officially, I think Greenland is like 50,000 people. Really small population. Because it's such a big landmass, but people really only live on the coast. And the middle of Greenland is like ice and mountain and stuff. So they mainly live on the coast. But very small population for the size of the land. But
once this happens, I could definitely see a Cigar Guys road trip to Greenland. That'd be just great.
That'd be a long road trip. You have to go all the way up through Canada and kind of go like into those little islands they have, and then take a bridge across Greenland. Once they build the bridge, of course, the super highway that goes straight there.
Yeah, that's what I really look forward to.
Yeah. But in terms of Greenland, Trump has said that obviously this discussion of the U.S. acquiring Greenland has actually happened before numerous times. I think back when it might have been Carter or even earlier, they were talking about buying Greenland. Now he's saying that for national security purposes, not just for America, but kind of for the rest of the world, it would be in the best interest of the nation, of the world, if the United States acquired Greenland for a few reasons. One being having more military presence in the Arctic. Russia and China both have increased their presence in the Arctic. I think Trump wants to get one step ahead of them. Acquiring Greenland would help minimize the Chinese, and potentially having Canada, the Russians on the other side. So he's arguing to the people of the world that for their best interest and security, the United States should acquire Greenland. What do you think about that?
Honestly, I wouldn't even gone that far. I think they're already doesn't Greenland already want to be?
Greenland is talking about gaining independence from Denmark, or separating from Denmark, essentially.
Well, the first step, yeah.
Right.
I don't think they're against it. So it's like,
yeah, I mean, there's obviously, just like Canada, it's like 50-50. Some people want to do it. Some people don't want to do it. There's a lot of people in Greenland that are talking about how it would benefit them to be a part of the United States. There's some people that say they don't want to.
What's interesting is like these individuals want their own 1776 in a clean fashion through a sale of land and property instead of war, which is actually a whole new ball game that we've actually never really seen before.
That's true. I mean, they wouldn't go to war with Denmark, and I don't think Denmark would go to war with them. It'd be more like a.
It'd be. I'm just saying, like, you know, with the United States originally, with the colonies going to war.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it's kind of like we don't have to do that.
So essentially, we're liberating another country.
Which is a pretty cool thing to say in our lifetime, because who'd have thought?
It is crazy, though. I mean, We obviously have acquired 50 states over the course of 250 years or so since the country was founded. I mean, back then, it was 13 colonies. Then they had the Louisiana Purchase, which bought so much land from the French. And then it expanded beyond that. Then eventually you get Hawaii, you get Alaska. And those were all done through deals. It was never done by force.
That's how it should be.
Right.
You know,
we did have war.
Maintain people's safety.
We had war in Texas, so there was conflict there. But that was more of a dispute on like whose land was whose, where the borders are going to be drawn. But realistically, yeah, I mean, the land was bought or negotiated in some sort of fashion. That's what I see is happening with Trump, or at least what he's discussing. And of course, the media is coming out and saying, well, are you going to use military force? And he basically said, no, not with Canada. He didn't say it was off the table with Greenland. But in speaking of that, he wouldn't use the military per se to use violence to take Greenland. There's no reason for that. I think he's saying he doesn't want to take it off the table completely in case Denmark tries to pull something. But I don't see that violence would actually break out from any of these potential plans that he's discussing.
No, I mean, I think there's a phone call. So far, it sounds like it's, economic negotiations. But people, too, are saying that this is basically strictly negotiation. And what he's saying is he's going to basically put the most aggressive deal on the table. Say, listen, I'm just going to buy Canada, or we're just going to take Canada, we're going to take Greenland as a bargaining chip. And then he's going to basically use that to come down like one or two steps. So that way they'll just agree with the second option instead of like for example, if I come to you and say, I want to buy your Tesla for 10 grand, you'd probably laugh at me and say that's ridiculous. But if I came up and said, okay, I'll buy it for 80, you're like, oh, okay, well, that's better. For an example. I'm especially with Canada with the tariffs, I think there's a new way to buy something that benefit both sides. I don't think it would be necessarily monetary value. I think it would be a beneficiary of both sides financially.
So it's not going to be a flat out
no
buy. It's more of a negotiation where it's like, hey, let's just do this to help each other out. We don't have to put tariffs here. I mean, and what Trump was saying too is that, and when he had a discussion with Trudeau, he said, listen, the U.S. does so much for Canada. If the U.S. stopped funding Canada and helping Canada in all these ways, what would happen to Canada? And Trudeau himself said that Canada would dissolve without the help of the United States. So what Trump is proposing is essentially that Canada is completely reliant on the U.S. We protect them with military. They basically are making money off of us when it comes to certain trade and things. So he's saying, listen, without us, you really wouldn't be anything. The country would collapse. So let's work together instead, merge, so to say, so that way we can be a larger landmass, larger GDP, larger military, basically merge everything together so that way they could be an even bigger powerhouse.
Yeah, I agree. What's interesting is that since the Crown still owns Canada, I want to know. I think that there has to be discussions there. I don't really think there didn't be any discussion with anyone who's a prime minister or used to be of Canada.
So you're saying that
it was superseded right away.
So you're saying that he wouldn't have to talk to Canada; he'd have to talk to the Crown essentially and negotiate with them.
That's what I believe, because essentially, the Crown owns still most of the land in the world, including Canada. And now that, because of optics, like Trudeau's already stepped down, kind of allows us to kind of bypass that. They can have their election locally, but that prime minister being picked would soon be like a governor, essentially, in the future when this does happen. Because
if they were to have an emergency election, I think it would happen like in 2 months, or the deadline would be in 2 months, so to say. So they would start the election now, because I think their election's in July officially, but they would have to have an emergency one in March, from what I understand.
Yeah, and this is already Yeah, obviously, I think what we see in the news is actually things that have already happened or most likely already underway. So, I mean, these negotiations are already happening before even Trump gets in. Just like when he was in before. So,
by the time we find out, the conversations have already been had.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for it to be finalized. Of course, the media is going to find out a few days late. And then once it officially happens, then everyone knows.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, I think that we'll always know things late.
Yeah.
And the media will always spin it based on whatever they want to say.
Of course, yeah.
Whoever gets the most views.
Exactly. But yeah, so I mean, he's talked about Canada. We'll see what happens with that. Greenland as well. That's a similar but also very different conversation. People argue that that might be an easier one to spin than Canada, but
then if you do Greenland first, and you have Alaska, Greenland, and the entire United States that surround Canada, it's like, why don't you just join anyways?
So you're saying maybe that's the timeline we see.
Well, he's already talked about buying Greenland
in the past.
In the past, when he's already president prior. So I think it sounded crazy before, but now it sounds more appealing now.
Well, I think too, there's certain things that have happened recently that make it sound more realistic. Whereas before, it's like, let's buy Greenland. If he had said like in 2016, let's buy Canada, they'd be like, what are you talking about? But now, because of all these talks economically with tariffs, Trudeau stepping down, the stars are kind of aligning in such a way. With Greenland, coincidentally, around the same time, they're talking about breaking off from Denmark. So it's kind of like what you're saying. I feel like it's already in motion, and now the optics are kind of catching up to what might happen soon.
Well, I think what we're witnessing is like when someone leaves a company, naturally it's better for optics, because if Greenland left Denmark by itself, essentially, and we didn't want them, then you're kind of like you're just hanging in the wind. You don't have any allies.
Will they be an independent country with probably little to no self-reliance, so to say? I mean, like I said, very small population. I'm sure they could self-sustain themselves, but who's really going to protect them? And
they have no allegiance
them?
Anymore. So it's like you got to kind of pick. I think a smooth transition with these other countries will open up the doors to help resolve issues in the Middle East, and hope to God Europe. There's various things in Europe that could be fixed as well.
No, I agree. So we'll see what happens with that. And he also talked about the Panama Canal, which was built by the United States originally, and for whatever reason sold to Panama for $1, so that Panama technically owns it.
It's always a theme that a certain side always has to go in and fix things. Always a cleanup, always an operation, always a help out,
And he's been talking about this because China is operating heavily out of the Panama Canal right now.
Yeah.
He said that when that deal was originally made with Panama, they were supposed to treat the United States pretty fairly, in good faith, that since they did basically give them the Panama Canal, it's like, hey, you should treat the United States fairly in terms of trade using the canal. And he's saying that right now, Panama is charging the United States more than any other country to use the canal. And like I said, China has been using it quite aggressively, taking advantage of that route. So he says that in the best interest of the United States, that we would take that canal back, or the ownership of it back, and try to minimize the Chinese from using it as much, get a better deal out of there in terms of trading.
Yeah, I mean, Trump talked about this a lot before when he was running, where I feel that, or he said that he believes, well, we all know, let me just slow it down, that a lot of people we help out, especially militarily and with trade, never pay us back anything. So, I mean, out of good faith, Panama probably should give us that canal back, because we could use military force to help protect everyone's interests in that area, as we do the rest of the world anyways.
Well,
so
exactly like you're saying, when it comes to spending money for NATO, the United States is like, billions and billions of dollars higher than the second biggest spender.
Yeah. But back to the Panama Canal, I mean, if we built it and in good faith we should use it, why are we being charged for it to begin with?
Right, exactly.
That's like,
well, I think that's why the original deal obviously is not being
honored.
Right, it's not being honored. it fell through at some point because why should we be paying for it anyway? We built the thing and then we relinquished control to you, at least in good faith, say, hey, you guys are allowed to use it, with respect, not charge you for it, or at least charge you like a very small amount, if anything. But no, to be taken advantage of like that, Trump is saying that it's not right at all.
Well, to me, I don't think we should have to pay for it at all. If we gave it away in good faith and we built it ourselves, we shouldn't be charged at all. But since this is happening, to pay that debt back, we should just be able to take it over, control it, maintain it, because we built it, and then make sure nothing bad happens.
So what I'm hearing is the United States is going above and beyond to help other countries.
Yeah.
And has done it for so long.
Yes.
That it's really not even mutually beneficial anymore. It's so other countries might be taking advantage of the United States' kindness,
which has been happening in many different areas for years, especially on trade. And this kind of opens up the next conversation that when this does happen, we can kind of fix the Gulf or rename it or however you want to look at it.
The Gulf of Mexico, which is proposed to be called the Gulf of America.
Yeah. Which is, just basic facts. We're all, North, Central, and South America should be called the Gulf of, America.
Right. Exactly. So we're in we're in North America. There's South America. The Americas. People interchange the terms.
Yeah.
Like we're in the continent of America. People say.
Because in theory, we're all Americans, so it should be the Gulf of America. And so when we fix the trade, we stabilize the area. Ideally, it's going to be opened up for everybody, maybe at a cheaper rate,
right? And my point too,
costs.
Yeah, my point is, it's the Gulf of America. Just makes sense.
Yeah,
it's not like you have people, of course, that don't understand geography, and they say that he's talking about the United States of America, and then there's people that say America is not the country; it is strictly the continent. So it's all like antics, and people don't exactly either know what they're talking about or they don't get specific enough to have an actual conversation.
I think most of these people are just natural. Let me create an argument, and then they have nothing to argue.
Right.
And then it kind of ends.
Parrots.
Yeah. And they got that from somebody else.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I actually forgot about that one. The Gulf of America as well. So there's, as far as, mainstream talk right now, at the time we're filming this, 4 major areas geographically that Trump is looking to acquire, so to say.
Yeah.
I think it's funny too. I don't know if you saw one of the Canadian officials that was kind of firing back at Trump, and she said, well, I have a deal for you. What if we bought California? Or what if we bought Minnesota? And it's funny because it's like...
With what money?
Well, not only that, but California has a larger economy than Canada does.
Yeah, so,
If we acquire Canada, it would be... The GDP would be less than Canada's. Like if it was its own state. It currently is. California and New York and Texas, I think, have a larger GDP than Canada has. And but it's obviously all talk. It's all the Trump derangement syndrome, and they're reacting emotionally.
The irony of this point is that if you want to retain in politics, when this does happen, why be so outspoken?
Right.
Because you may not be able to retain this political standpoint or position that you're in, the job itself.
And I think a lot of what's happening right now is a lot of these politicians are kind of exposing themselves to the world, but mainly to their own people as well. And we've talked about this before. We're seeing that the votes are changing. A lot of people are voting for different parties now because they look at the leaders in their party and they are tired of them, fed up. They're not doing a good job, and they want to vote new people in to hopefully for them to do a better job at running the country or their state or province or whatever.
Yeah, I think we see that locally here in Florida, where a few people have switched parties even after the election. And I think originally a lot of people have a mainstream idea of what they would like, and they think they can get it done by going a certain route through a party. But I think over the years you start to realize that a certain party is very closed, has very closed ideas. And if you ever think differently, and all of a sudden now you're an outcast.
No, I agree. I do think that strictly aligning with your party on all issues can do more harm than good.
Yeah.
But actually, just like you said so eloquently, one party seems to be very narrow-minded, and the other party seems to be a little more flexible on some things, or more. They're willing to not just stick to the party ideology, so to say. They're willing to bend here or there to negotiate on behalf of what is the best option.
I mean, that party has changed so much over the years that I think that like the party of JFK, when the Democrats were very open, like it was cool to do that.
Right.
Now it becomes
they truly were liberals.
Yeah.
At the time.
Freedom of rights.
Now they're only liberals by name.
Yeah.
And really not at all by their actions and their policies and how they govern.
Yeah. I mean, like we talked about this before, but I think that if JFK were to vote today, he'd obviously vote the other way. I don't think he'd be on the Democratic Party because it's everything against everything he's ever done or believed in,
Yeah. The Republican Party today is closer to the party of JFK than today's current Democrat Party. I mean, no, you're exactly right. And speaking of California, once again, we're seeing these uncontrollable wildfires happening. And there's no water to put it out. And of course, every time this happens, the taxes on water go up. The citizens are essentially going to be paying more for their water bills for the reason of fighting these fires that are totally not man-made fires.
What's interesting is that it's in Southern California this time, and much closer to, I would say, the ocean, more or less, where they're geographically.
They have more ocean that they're exposed to.
Yeah, this time. Usually they're more in like Northern California. So It's very interesting that this year it's happening somewhere else, I guess. I don't know.
But two, I mean, so what are they claiming? That it's so hot and so dry that a forest fire just spontaneously erupts out of nowhere because of quote unquote climate change?
Well, years ago, I don't know if it's climate change, but years ago it's about that there's so much land, all the brush has built up, and so when it gets dry, it's it comes aflame because it's not being cleaned up.
But I would argue that in order for a fire to actually start, there needs to be some sort of ignition or some sort of flame to actually start it. Like I could understand if someone had a fire that they left unattended and it got out of control, which led to the huge wildfire. But for people to say that because it's hot and dry and there's a lot of brush and leaves that are left around, it just erupts out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm really not sure the exact details, but I think that when years ago when this was happening, I just think that if we know naturally over the years where these have been, we should spend money to clean this up. I just don't think that has happened.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's why it's happening in Southern California this time or this year versus I don't really know.
So do you think that these fires are totally by accident, or do you think that these fires are happening for a reason?
I think it's a little bit of both in a sense, because why would you raise water prices when people need water for help to help combat the natural disaster? It's kind of like constantly raising medical prices and forcing people into debt when you can't foresee it coming. It's not really their fault necessarily. And plus, we have tons of funding from the federal government to help California too, and any state who asks for it.
So you're saying, regardless of how the fire actually started, it is immoral for them to continue to take advantage of it and charge the citizens more.
Well, is it forever? That's what I'm saying. Is it forever?
is what forever.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you're pouring out tons of water, someone has to pay for it. And if you live there, obviously, you're going to be paying for it. What I'm saying is, are they going to raise the prices forever, or will it come back down to when the problem's resolved, or the brush is cleaned up, or, you know?
Well, I guess the issue is it continues to keep happening. So there's no really way to tell if they would volunteer to raise or to lower the prices again. So far, they haven't. Every time there's a hike, it's stayed there until they raise it again.
Yeah, just like with their state taxes, too. So it's like it never... You know, it's like, when do we actually help the people? You know, I don't really know.
Well, I
don't think they want to.
I rarely hear of the government giving a discount anyway.
Well, is the federal government not helping, or is it their local government, or even the county? I don't know. I really don't know. I've never been to South California, so I don't know.
Well, I guess like you said, this time it's different. It's different geographically in terms of where the fires are happening. But personally, I think that there's more to it. I do think that the government is utilizing it to take advantage of the people at the very least.
For the water prices?
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think it is strange in a sense that, like, it's the coldest time of the year in a place that's naturally 70 degrees.
Right.
Year round.
In the summer.
Yeah. No, I mean, right now.
I know what I'm saying. It's 70 degrees in the summer.
Oh, even in the summer. Yes. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, in general, like, I mean, I don't know. It just seems kind of strange.
No, I agree. Yeah, especially in the beginning of winter. Doesn't make sense to me.
But I mean, I've seen the pictures. I want everyone to be safe because, I mean, it's a wildfire, so it'll keep spreading and spreading and spreading. And there's so much mountainous terrain and stuff like that. So if you live, you know, how you live, it's going to be very difficult to get out.
So TikTok, there's been a constant battle. The United States wanted to either buy TikTok or it's going to be banned from the United States. As of right now, they're saying that on January 19th, coincidentally, it's going to be banned from the United States unless something happens. Right now, Trump is trying to save TikTok, and from what we've heard, it's a losing battle right now. Do you think, first of all, do you think that TikTok is actually going to end up being banned? You can speak about that generally. And then second, well, actually, let's just go with that one first. Do you think it's actually going to end up being banned?
No. I don't even know how this even comes up. It was like the Internet Bill of Rights years ago. And they talked about banning TikTok years ago.
Yeah.
But then you can also say, with another Chinese company, Huawei, or, you know, they did prevent that company. So, I mean, it is possible. They have done this in the past. But, like, the thing is, it's a weird situation, right? Because, like, if the servers and the data is stored outside of the United States, which a lot of data from other companies are, you kind of have to ask yourself, even if it was bought by the United States government or a U.S.-based company, are they just going to magically move the data from one computer to another, one data center to another, servers for one servers, make a copy? Or they're going to have to change their privacy policies? Because you see other big, you know, tech companies like Facebook, for instance, kind of opening up, relinquishing, like, what can be said. So if data is more user-based controlled, then what is the fear of TikTok?
Right. Well, I think that from the Facebook side and the Meta side, that's now coming out. When the whole TikTok issue started, the United States was arguing that we don't want China to have access to all our data, so we want access to all the data to protect the citizens, so to say. But
the hyper irony of this is that, like, Facebook, people naturally give their data to Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp all the time.
Right.
And then when it comes to Google, anytime you want to research something, you give your data to Google. So it's honestly voluntary on the user anyways, just like TikTok. So banning TikTok is kind of like they're getting punished for doing the exact same thing that United States-based companies do.
Right.
So it's like, are we doing something hypocritic or what?
Yes. Personally, I think that TikTok is here to stay. I do think that it potentially could get banned on the 19th. But what happens is it gets banned on the 19th. That means people can't download it from the App Store anymore, right? But it's still on your phone. So the whole thing is, if it gets banned, you have access to it still. And because they can't update it, eventually over time, the app will deteriorate and you won't be able to use it anymore. So if it gets banned on the 19th, that doesn't mean that Trump can basically come in and still figure out a way to reverse it. put it back on the App Store, and then there's really no issue. You still have it on your phone. You were still able to use it this whole time. So there was just a brief period of time where new people couldn't download it onto their phones. So he still has time to kind of put it back into place, and that way it can continue to function as normal and be updated in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. I think the timing's very strange. I don't understand why January 19th or whatever.
It is very coincidental because what happens the following day?
It doesn't get banned.
Well, Trump gets in and things change.
Well, it's funny. Things have already changed and are changing, just like when he got elected before.
Yeah. So much so you have people on social media saying or believing that he actually is the president. Meaning like people were like, oh, well, you guys said that Trump would become president and gas prices will go down. He's been president since November. And it's like, you voted? You know how this works? I don't blame them though, because to be fair, since November, we've seen more of Trump by a lot than we've seen, the actual current president. And I agree. He seems to be getting a lot more done, at least for the best interest of the United States, than the current president is.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but the last 4 years have been like the longest 4 years of my entire life. It's been like everything's been in a standstill where it's kind of like, what the hell happened? Like, it doesn't make any sense to anybody. No one benefited. No one grew. Nothing happened good from this administration. You can't say anything positive.
It's like a really bad fever dream.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really weird situation, It's not anything against them. I just think the timing, the picks, I mean, I feel bad for the Democrats. Honestly, they were forced to have people like Kamala twice. She ran twice. She got no votes the first time she ran 2020. Then they put her as vice president. Then tried to run for 2024. It's unfair to them. They didn't have anyone really pick from.
Mm-hmm.
I think they did want Biden in there though, but I think that nothing really got changed. There's not one major thing that you can say that was a positive thing for the United States of America as a whole, right?
Well, even realistically, no one truly wanted Biden until they basically ushered him in. He ran 3 times before and got basically, max 4% of the vote in the primary. He runs this time. They basically propped him up, and the mainstream media was able to convince a majority of the Democrats that he was the true frontrunner and that he was the one that was going to, do a great job and be the best president. So even that was all orchestrated, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just mean like out of all the other people, at least he was VP before, and like he had other actual experience.
I got you.
He wasn't just sitting around, my pick me, kind of thing. Where it's just like,
I'm a woman.
No, it's not even that. It's he's actually been in the White House, so it's like he has the experience. It's on paper. Even Hillary Clinton would have been better than Kamala. I mean,
more, in terms of experience-wise, and
experience,
a resume,
and she's been there.
Yeah, it would make more sense.
Yeah, she's held these positions and she's done it. So it's kind of like, honestly, I'm shocked they didn't go with her again. Honestly, I'd have done that.
Yeah, I think they would have been better off. Honestly, even though she lost the first time, I still think she would have had a better shot than Kamala.
I mean, she was so close to 2008 as well. I mean, she was so close.
Yeah.
I think the third time might have been, much better.
Yeah. And then speaking of January 20th, do you think that Trump is safe on Inauguration Day?
Yeah, I mean, I think God will protect him ultimately, but I think there will always be a threat of violence from many unnamed parties on this podcast. But
I think people say that the Secret Service has failed in the past in terms of Trump assassination attempts. So there's lack of trust in who is actually protecting him on this big day, January 20th. So there's security concerns in terms of that. There's a lot of talk about that. I was just curious what you thought was going to happen.
Think Trump and many other people would easily volunteer to protect him, but I think he has high friends in other places that aren't necessarily named, especially people in the United States military that would easily help protect him.
I think that it's going to be okay. I agree with you. Still something to be considered and talked about, but yeah, it is crazy to have to even have the conversation where you really can't trust the Secret Service based on what's happened in the past.
Yeah. Because you can't just simply say this is a one-off thing. because he had like 3-4 assassination attempts in the last like 6 months. So we're to the point now where it's how he needs more protection, specialized protection.
Mm-hmm. And he's always had his own security, pretty much for the most part, especially when he was running in 2016.
Yeah.
His own private security. I mean, he's had private security for a big portion of his life, being a real estate mogul and a multi-billionaire. He kept those people as best he could throughout the campaign. His first campaign, I know that once he became president, he kind of had to transfer to Secret Service, and still he does have Secret Service because he's a former president. So I'm sure he can figure out a way to integrate some of his own people that he trusts into his protection detail instead of solely relying on the Secret Service that's given to him.
I mean, you already jumped past this, but January 10th is supposedly when he gets sentenced.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen there?
Well, it's already been said that he's not going to get jail time. That's already been said.
Will this be the first time in like American history you can be a 34-time convicted felon and not serve time? Has that ever been possible?
I don't know.
I've never heard of that in my life.
I don't know. But no, I mean, he's not going to do any sort of prison time, no jail time. I mean, it's, again, every time, it's been said so many times, he's going to get convicted, he's going to go to jail, this and that, and nothing's ever happened. At this point in the game, it's like, there's no way in hell anything's actually going to happen to him. I think that they're holding on to what they can, which is what they've been doing. They're just slowly losing grip of anything of substance they can use against the incoming administration.
So the win would be convicted felon. Nothing happens. So the win is to say that we did something, but nothing happened.
Unfortunately for them, yes, that's all they got.
And he can still appeal this, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, again, it's all like, it's just basically ongoing garbage in a sense. It's more ammo for the media to use against him. But at this point, it's like, that's not even working anymore. Obviously, he got reelected again, despite being, quote unquote, convicted of 34 felonies, all the other garbage that was put out there. So.
And the various voting systems have yet to be fixed, which is interesting.
Yes. Maybe, just maybe, this will be the last election where we have these sort of concerns, at least for a very long time.
Ideally, yeah.
Yeah. I think we're going to wrap it up, though. Great conversation there. Great list of topics. I'd love to go further, but we're kind of on a time crunch today. Maybe we'll bring this kind of conversation back in the future. Let us know what you thought about this discussion and some of the topics we talked about. What do you think is going to happen in terms of the expansion of America or any of the other topics we discussed? But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cigar Guys podcast. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with all the latest episodes. Looking for short-form content? Check out all our social media accounts in the description below.